that the Pfizer data is through, and that it appears to be safe for between 5 to 12-year-olds to have the vaccine from the clinical trials that they've run, and that the FDA will check that data and then make that consideration as to whether or not to give an emergency approval to the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds, which would mean they could be vaccinated sooner rather than later. I've seen some people say before Halloween or by Halloween, and that comports with other things that I'd heard that said, potentially by the end of October. That would be a big relief to a lot of on-the-ball parents who were cognizant of the risk posed to children. The risk posed to children of secondary deaths or secondary injuries as a consequence of overly full pediatric intensive care units, as well as the still unknown consequences of long-term COVID for children who do experience a severe case of COVID or even a moderate or mild case. We don't know if they're going to be commensurate with the long COVID symptoms that have been observed in adults, in which case brain fog, fatigue, reduced organ functioning have been observed in adults who've suffered from long COVID. All right, so and what are the other topics for today? A shooting in Heritage High School in Virginia, where 2 people have been taken to hospital. One boy was shot in the face and one girl was shot in the lower leg, and both of their conditions have been adjudged to be not life-threatening. But it might make the news more than all of every other shootings, school shootings that now occur without national media attention in the United States, because this is the first significant one to occur since school started across most of the United States last week. So school back for the new year, the first notable school shooting, although I believe there have been 2 other school shootings in that time since school started. And that it's a high school, but also people in the years 5 to 8th grade also attend that school as well. So when I think about 5th graders, that's close to my son's age, and to feel that this is often accepted as an inextricable part of American life, the kind of trade-off that you make in knowing that car injuries occur frequently, but that nobody is proposing we give up cars. However, cars and the driving of cars is highly regulated. You have to obtain a license and you have to obey road rules. I think there's fairly broad support for more rules to be associated, more rules to be legislated in association with gun ownership and gun storage. And I'm proposing myself to join a local group so that I just can feel like I'm doing something. So there will be a Mums Demand Action chapter in Boston. I think it's a group that's existed for a while, born of parental disquiet with the lack of legislative progress after a number of 5 and 6-year-olds were murdered in their classroom in the Sandy Hook shooting. So someone called Red Chris is here and has said that it's truly sad. Yes, it is truly sad, and I am sad about it. There's a lot of other news I'll cover as well, though, but I would like to just do that shout out to joining Mums Demand Action Group. Anybody who wants to join it, I believe dads and other responsible adults can join those groups as well, even though the membership, I think, is predominantly female. There are a lot of dads as well concerned about safe storage of weapons and the proliferation, or men who have observed that the proliferation of guns in American society doesn't make it safer per se. It's associated with a higher homicide rate, and states that have a higher number of guns being owned and a higher percentage of the population that own guns, there's an increase in the number of police officers in those states that are injured by guns, and consequently a rational basis sometimes fueling police hypervigilance about worrying about being injured themselves, and so preemptively taking action and even brutalizing members of the public. as well as compounding any tendencies that people have towards white supremacy and racist prejudging of people and racial profiling, as well as just the white supremacist tendency to want to injure people when they believe that they are not in danger of being observed. Or even, as in Derek Chauvin's case, when he knows he's observed, but is too proud to stop doing what he's doing, even when told by members of the public that he was killing George Floyd, he didn't want to stop applying pressure to George Floyd's neck and didn't want to stop that process of murdering George Floyd because he didn't want to admit wrongdoing, and he didn't want to admit that he should stop that behavior that was torturing a man and causing his death. So I'm also sad because now that I've moved to the US, I have to contend with the reality of knowing people who feel very differently to me about certain things, but who also draw their facts from very different sources, and who would fall into a category ranging from outright delusional about COVID to just unnecessarily biased against Joe Biden. So I have one neighbor who wanted to supply me with a video. She offered to supply me with a video of Joe Biden being racist. And I said, was he really being racist? She's like, oh yes, you have to see the video. So it's a complicated scenario. I've often advocated for white people doing more to step up and not just always avoid conflict, to step up sometimes and disagree with people, even when it's uncomfortable, to welcome the awkwardness of challenging some people's assumptions. Joe Biden, in the speech that my neighbor sent me, was talking about his support for the crime bill that he helped author. And whilst that crime bill and that speech now does have an attached degree of controversy, because Joe Biden was trying to out-Republican Republicans and claim being tough on crime as a Democratic Party purview. So he was trying to say, yes, it doesn't matter if society failed you and if you haven't had parents and you haven't had structure and have grown up to be a sociopath. What is key is that members of the public are protected from your violence. And so if you are a violent criminal, you have to go to jail. That was the intention of the crime bill. I know in real life the various embedded prejudices of the legal system, as well as the association of structural racism-led poverty being highly correlated with some types of crime and some types of the human condition, whereby people are more on edge and are more likely to pursue violence, but not guaranteed. There's still obviously always an element of individual choice. And at that point, when Joe Biden was making his speech, he was not emphasizing he was not emphasizing societal causes of crime. He was emphasizing accountability and protecting the public. So when I heard his speech, I messaged my neighbor back that I had followed the clip she provided me with, and that she, hello Pablo, nice to see you. And I went with her suggestion. I watched the clip of Joe Biden's speech, and I wrote back to her that I didn't think it was racist because he was talking about criminals and he did not specifically refer to Black people. So he was not conflating the Black population with the population of criminals. And she said that, I said, do you think it's the intonation? Because first of all, I read the transcript. I said, I read the transcript and there wasn't anything racist in the transcript. He didn't refer to Black people. He was referring to violent criminals. She said, you have to hear the clip though, and I can't find the clip online, and that's proof that they don't want you to see it. I was like, really? But then she found it. She found a CNN news story where they had uncovered the clip as well and replayed it in a news story when Joe Biden was running as a primary candidate. So she sent me that link, and then I watched it and said, no, I'm doubling down. It's not racism. He's describing criminals. There aren't any words that he uses, and can you really argue that it's intonation? The intonation shows that he's referencing the Black population. She's like, yes, the intonation. I was like, So I said a lot more to her about why I didn't think only Black people are criminals. And she said, oh, well, you think he's referring to only white people. I was like, I don't think he's referring to only white people. I think he's referring to criminals, which is a subset of people who've behaved in a certain way, not a subset of people with a certain skin color. And she pointed out that I had to look at who the crime bill had predominantly affected. And I said, even if the bill itself did result in the disproportionate jailing of Black Americans, I think there's a lot of factors to account for that, rather than accuse the people who wrote the crime bill of targeting Black Americans merely because it espoused a tough on crime approach. And now it's going to be awkward. So I'm reaping what I sowed. I am dealing with the consequences of that principle I've often espoused of white people stepping up to be clear about not siding with racism or not tolerating projected accusations of racism. So accusing Joe Biden of racism for having a speech that was vehement in denouncing criminals, and somehow conflating that with Joe Biden being vehement in denouncing Black people. I don't conflate Black people with criminals, and I also like to denounce endemic practices of excluding Black Americans from wealth building opportunities, such as taking out mortgages from lending institutions, or getting loans, or getting fairly recompensed for being a GI and being able to access returning service person membership benefits, because that was denied to Black service members returning from World War II. Lots of ways in which white Americans and white American created institutions have stolen from and deprived Black Americans of wealth that was due to them, or wealth building opportunities that they could have availed themselves of in the absence of pervasive discriminatory policies and baked in institutional procedures. So I hope that makes sense to people. I will now turn to some of the other news. And that is that the former CEO of the Trump Organization, Alan Weisselberg, who's been charged already for an alleged tax evasion scheme in which the Trump Organization kept 2 sets of books and gave Alan Weisselberg lucrative benefits that weren't recorded in the official books that they gave to the IRS. But they did still keep an unofficial set of books in which they recorded all of the cars and the payments made for his grandchildren's private school education, and the apartment rent for Alan Weisselberg to live in a Trump Tower apartment, or wherever he lived, that was owned by Donald Trump and the Trump Organization, and that was that accrued significant tax-free benefits to Weisselberg, and the intention of ripping off the IRS and the intention of defrauding the general public was evidenced by the 2 sets of books. So that was pretty damning documentary evidence against Alan Weisselberg and against the Trump Organization. So the news is just that they are expecting that more indictments will be filed in that case. Here is just the news about the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine being pronounced safe for children ages 5 to 11. So the pharmaceutical firm will share its findings with the FDA and the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, as soon as possible. So that's good. That's good news. A lot of parents will be pleased at the end of October that their children can get vaccinated. And we just have to cross fingers that our children remain safe. In the meantime, I will say at a collective level, children are safer in counties where there is a higher proportion of vaccinated adults or vaccinated people above the age of 12. And that provides a higher level of protection for children who are too young to be vaccinated. It's in the states with the lowest vaccination rates for adults and over 12s that there's been the highest rate of pediatric hospitalizations relating to COVID, and potentially relating to other things. But it's just known at this point that various hospitals in southern states, Alabama and Mississippi, are experiencing high levels of bed occupancy in pediatric ICU wards. And ICU stands for intensive care unit. Oh, Christopher's here. Hello, Christopher. Christopher says, the problem is most people don't know how to conduct research. It is not your responsibility, but an article on what steps the layman should follow or a masterclass produced by yourself would enlighten the masses. What a lovely suggestion, Christopher. And it would be very good because one of the outcomes of feeling overwhelmed with information is for people to retreat into tribalism and easy answers from people who are in the business of pressing the feel-good buttons. So I've often noticed that Rupert Murdoch's American news organization, Fox News, is very adept at massaging the egos of its audience and framing things in a way that make the listener feel intelligent and able to see through all the pernicious efforts of the mainstream media. So it not only feeds them a warped view of the world, an often eliminationist view of the world via Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham that wants to eliminate migrants because it presents migrants as a threat to white people. And when there's population data that comes out that says, oh, America's demographics are changing and there are now there's now a smaller percentage of the population that's white, Tucker Carlson then frames that as if white people have literally been killed, as if white people have been eliminated, and that's how there's now a smaller percentage of the American population that is white. So I would like to say no white people were harmed in the making of those statistics necessarily. I mean, there are some white populations that have been dying at a higher rate than other populations, or at least a more rapidly increasing rate. White disaffected populations where there's been opioid addiction and lower levels of entrepreneurship and business success, often associated with neighborhoods that are high percentage white and aren't attractive to migrants and aren't necessarily welcoming of migrants. So those bad outcomes might be associated with some of the, what are they called? Deaths of despair is one sociological characterization of the high rate of middle-class white people dying from opioid abuse and drug addiction in general, and suicide, other deaths of despair. So liver failure, drug overdose, yes, those things are sometimes categorized as deaths of despair, and those type of deaths have been occurring or have been rising at a faster rate amongst certain white counties, Trump voting white counties, than in other populations, than in Hispanic or Black dominated counties. So back to Christopher's point about helping people do research in a responsible way. Yes, it's often associated with a college education that people have an idea of vetting their sources. But even college-educated people can still gravitate to something that feels good or makes them feel good. And a lot of highly intelligent people in Nazi Germany and a lot of highly intelligent, well-educated people now are still leaning heavily into delusional ways of approaching the modern era, delusional approaches to COVID. And I mean delusional because I've met someone who previously worked as a physician's assistant, which I think is on an equivalent level to nurse practitioner. And the physician's assistant believed fervently that doctors are being paid money to artificially inflate COVID death statistics, and therefore COVID is an overhyped problem, and he doesn't believe in it, and he doesn't believe in wearing masks. Now, this is someone who worked with surgeons, heart surgeons who wore masks as part of their job, and I said to him, you worked with heart surgeons who wore masks. And he said that's different. So mask wearing for surgeons is good. Mask wearing by members of the community who want to contain transmission of an airborne pandemic, that's apparently not so good. So yes. What have I got on the line here? I've got the fact that the biotech vaccine is safe for children ages 5 to 11. Hooray. There's a lot of other things I want to cover, and I have a few minutes still. Oh, this is a big story. This is the Washington Post story. Hello, Benita. Can anybody see what's in the right-hand side of my screen, or does it look too blurry? Because I might get rid of it if it's blurry. There's a packet of masks in the background and a peace lily given to me by one of my nicest neighbor. It's blurry. Okay, I've gotten rid of it. So what it said, I can read from it. It was an extract from a Washington Post article, which is delineating the reporting from Peril, the new book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. And it was about what happened. I'll read a little bit of it to you because I've got a subscription to the Washington Post. Senator Lindsey Graham had agreed to hear Rudy Giuliani out in a January the 2nd meeting arranged by Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, and held in his West Wing office. The South Carolina Republican senator met with Giuliani and his legal team to learn about findings that Giuliani and his team said could hand Trump a second term. Giuliani, Trump's personal attorney at the time, put forward a computer whiz who presented a mathematical formula suggesting Biden's support in certain states was unrealistic. Oops, I forgot to turn the light on. Graham, who's a lawyer and chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, found the reasoning too abstract. He wanted hard evidence. So I'll tell you more about what they sent in terms of hard evidence. Is there anything playing out loud? I should put my earphones on so I can hear. Which is Lee? Mike Lee is the Republican senator from Utah. So Graham and Lee, both of whom ultimately voted to certify the election results, they took Trump's claims of election fraud seriously enough to get briefed on the details. And they involved their senior staff and called state officials throughout the country. So what happened then? Giuliani's promised proof arrived on January the 4th in the form of several memos he sent to Graham, one titled Voting Irregularities, Impossibilities, and Illegalities in the 2020 General Election. So that was the stuff about various the allegations that dead people had voted, and the judges rejected those claims in court from Giuliani, saying that there was inadequate evidence and it seemed implausible. Giuliani claimed that nearly 12,000 overvotes existed in Arizona, and overvotes are apparently when somebody picks more than the maximum number of selections allowed. And that claim that 12,000 overvotes existed masked the fact that only 180 applied in the presidential contest, not nearly enough to close Biden's margin of victory in the state. And Lindsey Graham's attorney shared those concerns. His name is Holmes. Holmes found the sloppiness, the overbearing tone of certainty, and the inconsistencies disqualifying the author's right. The memos, he determined, added up to nothing. It wasn't until after a pro-Trump mob ransacked the Capitol that Graham, speaking on the Senate floor, said, "Count me out. I've had enough is enough. I've tried to be helpful." Do you remember when Lindsey Graham did that? Because, yes, afterwards he backtracked, went to Mar-a-Lago, spoke to Trump regularly, and said publicly that the GOP can't grow without Trump. But still, he has continued to deliver criticism directly to Trump, according to this book, Peril, by Woodward and Costa. In a phone call this summer, he bemoaned Trump's volatility and focus on voter fraud, telling the former president, "You effed your presidency up." Trump abruptly hung up on him, whereas a spokesman for Graham declined to comment. No, none of this is the stuff that I really wanted to share with you, but I finally reached that paragraph. The same day that Lindsey Graham met with Giuliani in the West Wing, so that was January the 2nd, Senator Mike Lee, Republican Senator Mike Lee of Utah, received a 2-page memo from the White House marked privileged and confidential. It included a stunning claim that Vice President Pence could hand the election to Trump because 7 states had submitted dueling slates of electors to Congress, split between the incumbent and Joe Biden. Pence could simply set those states aside on January the 6th and count only electors from the remaining states, it claimed. Pence, and this is a quote from the memo, Pence then gavels President Trump as re-elected. So there were memos being sent from the White House to a senator, a Republican senator in the Senate, Senator Mike Lee, that outlined a scenario they were envisaging and wanted to bring about, whereby Mike Pence uses his gavel to pronounce Trump re-elected and to overturn the election, and uses 7 states submitting dueling slates of electors to Congress. But as it turned out, 7 states didn't submit dueling slates of electors to Congress. So who wrote that memo? That memo was written by John Eastman, a conservative legal scholar, and the author of the memo, which was titled January the 6th Scenario. And the memo was obtained for the book Peril and also reviewed by the Washington Post. Senator Mike Lee knew that dueling electors were merely Trump loyalists putting themselves forward in certain states in a move the authors described as a social media campaign, an amateur push with no legal standing. Electors are generally bound by the popular vote in each state because they sum to 358. An absolute majority of 270 is needed to clinch the presidency. So there you go. John Eastman wrote a memo called January the 6th Scenario, in which he suggested Mike Pence could gavel Donald Trump a second election victory and overturn the results of the election. Vanita, you can follow me on Twitter and direct message me on Twitter after you followed me and I followed you back. So that's an easy way to communicate with me. Oh no, this tweet is unavailable. Why is it unavailable? Oh, maybe it's been reported for being incorrect. Okay. Oh no, here it is. So listen, this is extraordinary. Breitbart is running a piece that says that the left is mocking the unvaccinated so that they'll dig in and never get vaccinated and die and shift political power to the left. And this author writes, this is so weird on so many levels, I'm tempted to dive in on it Inception style. Let's have a look. I'll bring it up and see if it's blurry or not. Howard Stern proves Democrats want unvaccinated Trump voters dead. No one wants to cave to a scumbag like Fauci or any of the scumbags at CNN, so we don't. And what's the result? They're all vaccinated and we're not. And when you look at the numbers, the only numbers that matter, which is who's dying, it's overwhelmingly the unvaccinated who are dying, and they have just manipulated millions of their political enemies into the unvaccinated camp. So I think the argument here is that it's reverse psychology from Democrats to keep trying to introduce vaccine mandates and try to insist that people get vaccinated. That's really just us making it untenable for them to get vaccinated, because then it would hurt their feelings to give in to Dr. Fauci and to give in to CNN. So we're forcing them to become unvaccinated, and this is a specific deliberate manipulation to cause Trump voters to die and to then reduce the the number of voters who will vote for Republicans or specifically Trump loyal Republicans. Is there any more of that? Could it possibly be that the left has manipulated huge swathes of Trump voters into believing that they are owning the left by not taking the life-saving Trump vaccine? So this is someone who just really wants to at least put it on the record that they think the vaccine is good, that they want to characterize the vaccine as the Trump vaccine, and then claim that the left has manipulated the right into not wanting to take the vaccine by having Dr. Fauci recommend that people take it, and by having CNN host doctors and other professionals and indeed take an editorial position themselves that it is good to be vaccinated and reduce your personal risk of death and reduce the collective risk of harm to your community and your national economy, and just to be able to end the pandemic rather than perpetuate the pandemic by having a large unvaccinated population, ensure that there's continuing high levels of viral transmission within communities so that people with comorbidities are imperiled even if they are vaccinated, because breakthrough cases are more serious for people with comorbidities, with people with obesity or asthma or anything. There's a lot of things that count as comorbidities. There's a lot of people that get written off when people on the right, on that subset of the right that's anti-vaccination, insist that it doesn't really matter and that we shouldn't take any steps to contain the pandemic, and that wearing a mask is too great a sacrifice, getting vaccinated and risking undertaking the risk of side effects is too great a sacrifice. Yes, so that's interesting that argument is being made. Someone, and let's check what her qualifications are according to her. She's a traveling medical licensed clinical social worker. Okay. So she sat in a family meeting as part of a team medical meeting the other day, and she said before it started, the family handed out papers with their preferred treatment plan, printed from some ivermectin-friendly website, I presume, and they also asked for blood transfusions from unvaccinated persons. Okay, so imagine this is the family of somebody who's potentially intubated in hospital with severe COVID, and the family members are handing out to the team of assembled medical staff their preferred treatment plan, requesting ivermectin as a protocol, even though ivermectin has been found to not be efficacious with regards to COVID. It's an effective anti-parasitic medication used for both humans and used in veterinary circumstances, but a treatment also that people have been overdosing on when they obtain it through veterinarian or feed stores in order to buy this anti-parasite medication more cheaply. They've been buying the animal version and without any human recommendations for human treatment, and without any official medical recommendations for COVID-related treatment. They've been overdosing on ivermectin or taking ivermectin and dosing themselves, potentially seeing ropey bits in their stools and then mischaracterizing sloughed off bits of their intestinal lining as ropeworms that they've killed. It's a bad idea to take animal versions of an antiparasitic medication, and it's a bad idea to take antiparasitic medication for COVID or to prevent COVID when that medication has not been found to be beneficial in any way, shape, or form in association with COVID, and its use and the alleged medical professionals who support ivermectin are fueled against all medical ethics by their contrarianism and by their loyalty to President Trump, contrarian in chief of the years 2017 to 2020. Is that, I hope that's interesting for people so far. So yes, that comment was made in response to a doctor who reports seeing a post by a woman asking for prayers for a COVID positive parent with low oxygen levels heading to the emergency room. Her prayers are that the MDs allow us to advocate the plan my family has all chosen if we were to find ourselves here. Her profile photo, freedom to choose, unmasked and unafraid. So it's going to be interesting. I'm glad people are openly talking about the harms perpetrated by anti-vaxxers against themselves and their families, and more broadly speaking, against their communities, because it is putting more children in harm's way when you have higher levels of COVID circulating amongst a community. Then there's more risk to even vaccinated people, and there's certainly more risks for the people who medically cannot be vaccinated, including children who are too young to even have their parents avail themselves of the opportunity to be vaccinated. Andrew from Scotland has a remark that says, honestly, if you need to tell people to not take horse anti-parasitic medication, then they're probably lost anyway. Well, I disagree, Andrew, and my basis for disagreeing with you is that disinformation has ramped up a notch to a level of warfare that has drawn people in through avenues such as Facebook, through the other internet sources. So people who have relaxed into a habit of obtaining news from Facebook, from recommendations from people they know, have been targeted with an intense campaign to spread harm and to weaken America by weakening the vaccination uptake rates or lessening the vaccination uptake rates. It's a concerted campaign, and some of it is fueled by hostile foreign operatives from the Kremlin, who various researchers have identified, even pre-COVID, as contributing to anti-vaccination rhetoric on the internet. So literally, Russian operatives had infiltrated parent groups on Facebook prior to 2020 to tell people that it was better to take risks with measles than it would be to get vaccinated. And yes, Molly is here. Hello, Molly. Molly notes that some people are gargling with iodine now, which is a concern. Oh, and that reminds me, yes, iodine is the new thing. People have had to come out and recommend that people not swallow any iodine because it's toxic to swallow it. You can gargle it and spit it out, but if you ingest any, whether it be straight betadine disinfectant or the special formulation of betadine that has been produced as a specific gargle, that you can gargle with it. It's not going to treat COVID, and if you swallow it, it's going to be harmful. So poisoning is possible. So yes, thank you so much, everybody, for your time and attention today. I always welcome your feedback and your interaction. We get a lot fewer trolls than we used to in my earlier days of broadcasting. So I'm grateful to whatever filter method HAPS uses, and I'm just grateful to there being less trolls on the internet now. And I hope it's a function of Trump losing power and influence whilst he's out of office. There being less of that glee motivating people to say, ha, 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 you didn't expect Trump to win, and he did win, so we're going to spend his entire term mocking you, mocking your anxiety and your hurt. And yes, anyway, that's all from me. Take care, everybody. Hope to see you again soon, and hope to broadcast sooner rather than later. Thank you so much, Christopher. Molly notes that it does hurt to gargle with betadine throat gargle as well. Indeed. So lovely to see you all. Thank you, Christopher and Molly, and Andrew and Vanita. Thank you as well. Cheers, and talk to you again soon. Bye.